pre-council meeting, and we have about an hour before our next meeting, and I think Mickey said there's a number of slides she'd like to go to. So for the sake of time, I would like to encourage everybody to hold their questions to the end, and we'll plow through the slides and then go back to questions. Having said that, would you please help us?
Yes, thank you, Councilman Shob.
That still sounds
Council Chair Shob.
that works.
And the rest of the council for having us today to speak about a project update. We want to provide you with this status report of the 24 recommendations from the Citizens Coalition, and we're excited to be here today. We also have some backup. Jeff McCarrow from Olson Associates is here to help us. He was our consultant through the process, as well as the facilitator for some initiatives coming forward. We have Thomas Schaefer and Randy Hoskins also who have staff expertise to support if you have any questions at the end. So just by way of introduction, or I'm sorry, the agenda today, we're going to have an introduction and some background on why we are here. We're going to give you progress on the coalition recommendations. And then we're going to talk to you a little bit about some program delivery ideas that we have and want to share that we're pretty proud of, and finally have a conclusion for you and open it up to questions. So by way of background, a couple of years ago, as we were forming the 2016 to 18 budget, there was sort of, as a director, you can't just look at what's in front of you. You have to actually look at projections and see what's coming ahead. And during that budget process, we shared with you a graph on funding. We also shared what our street conditions were at the time, both residential and arterial. Some of the good news was that we were making great strides on arterials, but that we needed to give attention to residential. And at the same time in 2016, we had just completed the most recent LRTP update, where the community was really focused on preservation and maintenance. So this is something you've seen before, pavement management theory, keeping the good streets good, and thanks to Thomas Schaefer and his colleague Erica Nunez, they brought to us probably 10 years ago this new theory for working on streets while they're still in good condition, because it's low cost and it's low impact to our community. And so we adopted this new methodology, particularly on our arterial streets, and it is working very well. You've seen this graphic before. 75% of our arterial street conditions are in that low cost, low impact category. So as much as we can, we want to reduce that 6% needed for reconstruction and get that 19% even lower in the rehab bucket. But residential streets, it was a different story. We just didn't have enough financial capability of going as far with residentials, and what we were seeing was really static numbers happening on our residential streets. At the same time, and this is a graphic you've seen in 2016, so while we were looking pretty good, this red line is construction inflation. It grows at about 5 to 6% annually, and these are our funding sources. Oh, hey, oh gosh.
That's the second time I said that.
Okay,
Sorry.
you all right?
Yeah.
All right. I'll wait till you get seated and comfortable, because I know you like to keep your eye on the money. So this graphic represents us in the 17, 18, 18, 19, and beyond, really not keeping our head above water. We're looking at a graphic that shows our buying power reducing because we just aren't able to keep up with construction inflation with the source of revenues that we have. Finally, the LRTP update in 2016. This is where the community said to us, maintenance. We want a well-maintained transportation system for the long term. And we're ready for the city to really invest not only in growth, but also in preserving the existing system. So, as you can see, we needed to develop something really robust to address not just the challenges in front of us, but what was coming down the road. So I developed this 2-year strategic vision for transportation, and I knew that we had to have these 4 principles. First of all, we needed community alignment. We needed to really listen to our stakeholders by asking them what they think, and getting them to the table to become collaborators with this problem in mind, and also advocates for transportation. Secondly, we needed to include a portion of self-assessment in order to get staff commitment to make sure this was a transparent and accountable process at the end, whatever the outcome was. It was very important to me that we had staff at the table. Staff was part of the coalition so that we had been brought along through the process, through all the recommendations, and that we felt as though, because of being part of the process, we could deliver on those recommendations. And there's more buy-in now from staff than I've ever seen, and it's really an exciting time. There's a lot of movements. Third, we had to have a deliverable, an action plan, an implementation plan that resulted in action and activity, but plus a funding strategy. And the outcomes that we wanted through this process was overwhelming public and private support, and we really do believe we have that through this process. This is what we've been able to achieve. And again, as you know, in January of 2018, we brought forward the coalition recommendations, and it's these 3 parts to solve for a $33 million annual gap. Today, Lonnie and I will focus on delivering these cost savings and pursuing best practices. This is to talk about the 24 recommendations made by the coalition. So as far as my directives to staff, we wanted to prioritize our actions and our activities to make sure that what we were delivering was a response to the long-range transportation plan and a response to the funding challenges that we are now beginning to see in that gap between construction inflation and revenue growth. But also that staff is going to be accountable for completion of the implementation strategy, that we take pride and ownership of what is being recommended. So there is this new momentum with staff, and it's exciting again to see. But we don't want to stop there. We have a plan for further evaluation of initiatives. We are establishing a transportation committee to, again, annually review the initiatives that we want to bring forward. And now I'll turn it over to Lonnie, and he'll get into the weeds a little bit on the coalition recommendations.
Yeah, thank you. So the 24 recommendations that came out of the coalition's report in January, we've been digging into those a lot, making some good progress. So the first thing we really wanted to do is sort of type up what are these recommendations in more detail and really get down an implementation plan. And so that's a document that was emailed out, but we'll talk a little bit more of that here in just a second. So the status of these 24 items, we've basically got them sort of tabulated down in terms of ones that were either already complete, we're continuing to evaluate, and they're in progress, but will be completed yet in this year 2018. Those are the items that are highlighted in green, so green is good. Yellow, there's just a couple items there that we think we're probably going to get addressed in probably the end of 2018, more so into 2019, but still good things that we're working on and making progress on. And then those remaining ones that are highlighted on the screen in red and in your document are ones that are, they're funding dependent largely, but there's still some things that we're making some progress on, and I'll touch on those as well. So this is the document, and that won't show up well on screen, but this is what you have in your packet. This guy here that walks through all that, and that's really the implementation plan that we created. And our folks on our side, Randy Hoskins, Thomas, myself, others, Tim Byrne, and Streets have been working to basically outline a description of what are these recommendations, is there governing authority, things in municipal code that we need to be looking at or tweaking as well, a schedule, any potential cost implications, and then again, just what is that status? So, we can sure go through, all of those and answer some more questions. What I really wanted to do is kind of highlight a sort of a broad range of about 5 or 6 of these primary ones that are in some of these different categories, just to kind of give you a flavor of things we've been doing. Some of them are a little easier to solve, some of them less so. So this one, in terms of continuing emergency repair program, seems like a fairly straightforward and obvious recommendation, but again, it's things that have been in the works and also continued to really get our arms around in more detail. We feel like we are really addressing some of those emergency repairs, speeding up and improving pothole repairs more rapidly. The equipment that we purchased, the spray patchers, this force multiplier that are sort of taking the place of a typical 4-person crew, have been awesome. They've been durable. The patches are durable. It's improved safety and operations for our folks out on the street. If you can envision traffic control and folks that are out tossing cold mix in a pothole versus in a truck and an aero board and that type of activity, those things have been a good investment. And probably the other thing I wanted to mention on this slide is with the launch of Uplink, the app that maybe some of you are using or have seen more about since this last spring. It's opened us up to a lot more reporting, and that's been good too. We've really gotten in a rhythm of some of these weekly pothole reporting as part of this process. Folks, I think, are finding that a nimble way to reach out and get locations reported to us. So this one we're checking the box on. Obviously, there's a lot of work to do ongoing as we continue to talk about emergency repairs, but that's a good one.
Can I ask 2 quick questions? How long has it been finding the repairs work with this new material?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, John.
How long are you finding this new material lasts over the old cold store?
Yeah, they're the potholes, depending on weather and freeze and thaw cycles. Obviously, there's some that will reoccur, but the durability of this spray and this type of patch application has been much better, more robust than the typical cold patch mix that we've used. We've been stretching some of these repairs a whole season, coming back to them maybe a next season. But there's depending again on size and diameter and amount, volume, quantity of material that are in them, they've been better than what we've been doing.
Yeah.
John, I'm sorry I started before you got here, and I
No
asked the
question.
council to hold the questions to the end. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
That's why I asked.
We got a bunch of slides to race through, and we're gonna try to go a little faster.
So the next one, establishing curb cut flexibility, and what this really meant from the coalition's perspective is they wanted us as the city to look at outsourcing this and looking at bringing on private contractor support to do driveway curb cuts or curb ramp cuts. This is something that as we get calls and get inundated, spikes go with new development subdivisions, it really pulls a lot of our folks off the street that might be in the middle of emergency repairs or pothole patching or best made plans for a week or two. They're racing out to do this curb grinding and curb cuts. And so the good news is we've got a final draft of a unit price contract that's put together. It's going to be going out to purchasing, we hope, yet probably late June into early July. We've been working on procurement of this. That's going to happen. We're going to push that, and it's going to be a good item. Actually, the other one that's part of this is looking at rollover curbs in new subdivisions. Eliminates the total need to do curb cuts. That's something we've been working with the development community, some of the consultant engineers, updating our specs and LSPs to be flexible and allow for this type of rollover curb. A next phase might be that we get comfortable enough that we mandate the use of this, and that would basically eliminate even again the need to do that type of activity. So one that we're running down the road on. Design standard flexibility. This was kind of an interesting one as the team got our arms around it. It was really kind of at a push for saying, hey, City of Lincoln, and as a large MPO in the state of Nebraska, setting your own standards and specs for street design, lane widths, things of that nature. It was kind of interesting as we went through this effort because we're a little bit different in the state of Nebraska with our Nebraska Board of Classifications and Standards that sort of govern some of those typical things. 12-foot lane widths, what we can get allowances to go down to 11. We've basically adopted and said on multi-lane streets or on new infrastructure, we're going to go ahead and squeeze down those lane widths. We're even looking at some further lane width reductions on residential streets or for turn lanes down to 10 foot. There are some things that we're actively engaged with that NBCS group on through the NDOT. And soon here towards the fall, we're going to be working with the city of Omaha, has also been looking at a lot of these same types of implications. The number, if you remember from our report, was that even just, saving a 1 foot lane width on a per lane mile is about a $500,000 savings. So, again, those are things that we're really trying to squeeze. Looking at median widths, as we've implemented roundabouts at new intersections versus some of those other big, turn bays and things for extra width medians. So, again, all good things in terms of standards that we're sort of pushing a refresh on, and when we typically update those things here at the end of the year, you'll see more of that come through. This is one I wanted to highlight that was listed in yellow in terms of a simplification of the impact fee districts. Again, as some background, when we went through this, typically, as you all know, impact fee districts are set into 7 districts citywide. As we've looked back, I think that table on the left that you see there shows that it's averaged somewhere in around 2.5 million, since '03 annually, and that's carved up into 7 districts. And so we've been working a lot to see how could we consolidate that, streamline some of that funding, leverage more of those dollars to do more impactful projects. And Thomas Schaefer, Michaela Dugan with the Impact Fee Administration, we've been looking a lot of this. This is something we think we can bring to you prior to next year. If there's momentum to get this done, we'd love to see this. And actually what we've kind of been analyzed in the science of this is that breaking it down potentially into 3 areas. And it doesn't show up real well, but basically if you took the revenues from districts 1, 2, and 3, and then 4 and 5, and then 6 and 7, those would sort of be the pieces of pies that, lo and behold, as we look across all infrastructure types, they break down into those percentages, nearly identical on where that kind of rhythm of those dollars have been coming in. So further discussions on that, we'll be bringing some proposals for you all to evaluate, but something we'd love to get done. And then probably one of the other ones that's obviously important, and it is funding dependent, is the establish a more robust preventative maintenance program. And this is one that, was identified by the coalition to spend more dollars doing preventative maintenance. Just wanted to let you know that even though this is funding dependent, we are, again, working really hard to see what we can leverage, what we can do. And I mentioned the curb cut contract. The other one that's going to be ready to go, I think in July, is a utility cut repair contract. Our staff are out with plumbing, access, whether it be sanitary sewer or fresh water line taps for new projects, redevelopment. Those big open street cuts, our folks get the call and we go and we provide that service. We're again looking to privatize that. The interesting thing that we've been talking, and we're still sort of evaluating numbers and working hard with our maintenance operations group, but we think between curb cuts, which is somewhere around $600 to $700K in annual work, and probably this utility cut repair contract, it could be upwards of $1 million to $1.5 million. We really see the equipment, the staff time that's been dedicated to that as probably freeing up somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 7 FTEs. And if we do that, what we'd really like to do is take that group of those individuals and create not 1, but 2 directed formal sealing crews, and looking at what we can do out on the street to do crack sealing. So again, way to leverage some of those those dollars and some of that staff to get that done. We're currently addressing like 2% of that system. Coalition recommended, hey, we ought to be crack sealing somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20% of the system, so that about every 5 years you're getting that done. We think with this simple change, we can get to, not all that way, but probably 10, 12%. Again, it helps close that gap, right? So we're super excited about that. And then probably the last thing, and I'll turn it back over to Mickey, but one of the most important things that we saw come forward was the establishment of this transportation committee and getting more folks on board to really help us make decisions and step through this, so.
Okay. So when we talked about this, establishing this transportation committee, and Ms. Lamb and Carl, you were both there to see the feedback from the coalition members. About 94% of our members recommended that we establish an ongoing transportation advocacy oversight committee. Why is this so important? One thing that we really talked about during the process was the fact that we had lots of studies that were sitting on the shelf, things that had been recommended a long time ago, but staff wasn't really pulled in at that time. So getting their buy-in was also important, but having an advocacy group to maintain the oversight, accountability, transparency, but advocacy of transportation. So that was a fun discussion. So we have hit the ground running with respect to this committee. I'll bring up the charge here. This is a draft charge. Again, we want to provide additional oversight, collaboration, and advocacy regarding transportation infrastructure investments for the city of Lincoln. We want to adopt and develop what the state does. They do a transportation needs assessment and bring that to the appropriations committee every year on an annual basis. And they talk about performance and making sure that we're meeting our metrics on an annual or at least a biennial basis for system preservation, optimization, and growth. Review and discuss the prioritization of projects, the ones that you see in the CIP as we develop. We need to sort of bridge this gap between the 6-year CIP and this 20-year long-range transportation plan, and they would serve a really valuable function in doing that. And then recommending any additional areas of study that should be conducted. We should not stop assessing cost-saving measures and best practices in the area of transportation. So we're really excited about that. It will be a 12 to 15 member group of industry stakeholders, developers, builders, consultants, contractors, business owners, neighborhood reps, as well as staff. And again, that staff link is so important for buy-in. So you can tap into a little bit of departmental expertise, but also buy-in to produce the outcomes that the community wants. Just so you know, Mr. Rick Kruger has agreed to chair this coalition. We reached out to him. He's a very strong advocate for the Transportation Coalition recommendations, and he's been very gracious in offering his time to us. So we're really excited about that. There'll be more to come as far as the timeline and the announcement of this. I think we're hoping that late July we could have at least the initial kickoff meeting with this group. Okay, so I'm going to segue into project and program delivery should we happen to get additional funding for transportation, because that is the other part of the recommendations. As we've been thinking about this very closely, it was so important, and I've heard many of you sort of say, where is our project coordination? When we had the Summer of Progress, we had a lot of people angry at us for all the orange cones in the city. And when you're delivering a program like this, should we receive more funding, we need to do it in a very elegant way, a way that the community can absorb. Now, that means that one, will be focused a lot on residentials, on growth areas, but we have to continue to take care of our arterial streets. So this is very important to me, and again, it became one of those things that I really wanted staff to noodle on and develop a robust, modern management technique for coordination of projects. First of all, if you look at the condition map, we call it the spaghetti map in your packet, you can see that there is, yes, that's it. You can see that there is a lot of residential need for streets, and it's pretty much even among the districts. And what we want as a principle in going forward and developing a program is geographic parity. We want people to feel like their region is touched in some way, and as you can see, the needs are there for each of the regions, each of the districts. Secondly, were there economies of scale? Let's analyze very carefully on a 10-year horizon if we can do some project bundling and work together with all of the asset owners to put together a holistic project. Maybe it might include water and wastewater, and maybe it's working with LES and reaching across to talk to ALLO about more fiber infrastructure as we get the street done. So are there economies of scale that we can pull together through project bundling? Also, robust longer-term project coordination. We want to be a department that only handles it once. We call this the Ohio rule. So we aren't disrupting neighborhoods by fixing a street and then coming back later and fixing a water main. That doesn't make any sense. So let's work together to do robust longer-term project coordination and develop a systematic way for doing that. And also, how do we contract? Let's build some contract incentives as we go out to bid. So Lonnie's going to jump into how staff has really worked together across all assets of Public Works and Utilities. It's been incredible what they've put together. So I'll go ahead and let you dive in and show them what you've got here.
Yeah, again, just kind of some more examples, I guess. As Mickey mentioned, we've been thinking pretty hard about, how would we deliver more of a program and bite off more construction work. And certainly there's a lot of coordination of projects that goes on year to year, and currently in the development of a CIP across water, wastewater, design, construction, traffic engineering, our partners LES. There's a lot of that good coordination that's going on, but what we really wanted to do is get a little bit more scientific about that. We asked all of our divisions within the department to think about your 10-year plan of projects. What does that look like? What do you sort of currently have in CIP, and then even beyond that, maintenance and operations and new growth projects, kind of the whole kit and caboodle. And there's still some things that we're sort of synthesizing from the LRTP to get put in, but what we did is kind of a mapping exercise, and we used GIS and some analytical tools to help overlay some of this project work. And I think I saw Jeff McReynolds back there, so we've even pulled in some outside help with some of these mapping tools and things, and it's been really cool. Staff has done a lot of hard work to start thinking about projects and the impacts to one another, less so getting out of that vacuum. So this is really just a simple screenshot. This legend kind of indicates project delivery and traffic, wastewater, watershed management, just the different types and programs of projects. We've got some information we're pulling together from LES as well. But what we did is a large-scale mapping exercise of what do those projects look like and where are they at. I think we have upwards of nearly 1,000 projects listed, 200 or 300 in each of these divisions, and some sort of massive Excel and database tables that we're automatically pulling into our GIS mapping. You can see those were traffic engineering. You can see this is a shot of wastewater, and this is all across the city. We asked them to really look at what was the project, the location, the priority, what year it would be built, does it have impacts to traffic closures, lane closures. We tried to really start mining a lot of data about these individual rows of projects. So this is a map. So this is what's in purple, shows a quick example of wastewater, and if you layer on some of the sanitary internal projects, what that looks like. If you throw on traffic engineering, intersections, and lane widening and turn lane, projects like that, what that layers on. You look at water, main replacements and extensions of of their water line infrastructure. If we look at, again, streets, some of that's on your map that Mickey touched on. So we start to get a sense of how would all of these things overlay one another in quadrants of the city and by varied project types. And how might we look at, if we go in and fix one piece of infrastructure, let's fix the other three. So we tried to get a little bit smarter, and we created these nice hexagon shapes that sort of overlay sections and streets and in sections of the city to more analyze both the dollar value, the number of projects that fall within each of those parcels, and project costs. So we can now very quickly and seamlessly roll up a lot of analytics about all these projects based on the data that's been input. And if we make changes to those, flip-flop priority orders, you know, it will sort of automatically make these changes within the map. And so we're trying to really get to where would we start first, where would we be quick and nimble, where would we use this concept of a construction program manager, maybe bid and bundle projects, large-scale projects by quadrants of the city with a various contractor. We've been meeting with purchasing about procurement, maybe some opportunities to do some stuff on a recurring basis as we bid projects out to get rid of some of these timeline and real schedule implications that sort of are a little bit cumbersome today in delivering those types of projects. So that's where we're at. This just, again, gives you a snapshot by district. You can see, again, hundreds and hundreds of projects within those areas. And this is kind of maybe how we would, you know, break up projects or simple quadrants of the city. Lots of ways for us to analyze this data now that it's all been input into the system and the tools are sort of set up and ready to go and ready for us to, you know, pull the trigger if we need to. Just some next steps on this. We've got, you know, several citywide type projects that aren't in the system yet. We're trying to figure out how those might get pulled in, and just in terms of some of that annual sealing work that we do, some of the valve and hydrant replacements. We're still really loading in some of those additional major projects from the longer term LRTP and seeing how those might fit into the mix as well. So we'll probably continue to work on this a little bit, come up with more of a detailed sort of compilation of a sample in one district and how we might design, construct, and deliver that. We're also following up with our partners at ACEC and some of the consultant groups to see how might this be best broken off, designed, and kind of aggregated together to be quick and nimble and deliver a program. So a lot of good work going on in terms of sort of the overall program delivery side, and we just wanted to let you know that we're, you know, we're not all the way there yet, but we've been doing a lot of hard work. We think we've got a good game plan for some additional revenue and what a package might look like to help kick that off and get it underway.
Great. Well, in conclusion, I think that what we've done as a department is really assess some of the things that we're doing. We absolutely believe self-assessment is healthy, and we try to do it in a no blame environment. Not that it's always blame free, but we do believe strongly that it leads to improvement, and we're ready. We're already tackling so many of these recommendations because they're so good. And there is so much buy-in. Community engagement, it has been an invaluable tool. We are really listening to stakeholders, and ultimately it does really lead to better decisions. And I love that our department culture has really reached out to the community and to align itself with what the community values. The ACT, we're excited about this advisory committee on transportation, the first of its kind, something that is robust and long-term and reflects the public pulse, provides oversight and also advocacy into the future for transportation. And just to give you a little budget preview, in the next couple of weeks, you're going to be reading about our budget. And what I want you to know, this isn't just, you know, these small pieces. We have taken this so seriously. We have a comprehensive approach to put our best foot forward in the budget, setting ourselves up for success as a city, and we're really ready to take this on. So that's what we want you to know today. And then I'd open it up to questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yes, we got about 25 minutes
Oh,
before.
good.
So let's start over here with John, and I assume everyone has some questions.
Yeah, I want to congratulate you on Uplink. I know, Mickey, you sent them out too.
Yeah.
I would assume that that makes it a much more fast-paced response to citizens, and it also perhaps frees up, I know a lot of things go to you versus this way can get right to the department or.
Yes. So first of all, and Mr. Camp is being humble, but he actually brought this to me a long time ago. Hey, have you ever heard of Click Fix? It's a really great tool, and it took us a while to kind of analyze it and see how it might work, at least 2 years. We had to get our asset management program in place, Beehive, before it would really work well for us. But once that came together, we knew that it was the right time to incorporate uplinks, which is basically Click Fix nationwide, and put that into play. So thank you very much for that suggestion. What it does now is, because the two programs can talk to one another, we used to have potholes called in through a hotline, or maybe you email through the Action Center, and someone would have to manually deal with that call in some way and get it into a work order. But now Uplink is directly linked to our asset management work order program, and so they communicate through the software. So it's wonderful. And then when it's complete, it communicates that back to the customer. It's been
Thank you.
a great tool, low cost. And
I had a quick question. You've referred to the Transportation Committee and transportation, a lot of things. What's your definition of transportation?
what's my definition of transportation? It does not include transit, so I kind of follow the money. I use, putting my lawyer hat on, I use sort of whatever the statutory framework for using transportation funding defines for transportation expenditures. So if you're looking at Nebraska revised statutes and those definitions, and what is eligible for expenditure, and also our own street improvement tax code spells out for us what transportation funds are for. But at this time, transit has a separate funding revenue source, and so I wouldn't include that from a city standpoint, even though the state does have federal and state transportation funds include transit. At this point, for the city, it does not work that way.
So this will supersede streets and roads?
This will supersede our transportation funding sources today.
No, this and the name. I'm trying to think how not to be confusing to citizens.
Okay, primarily it's
I would
streets.
think of buses.
Yeah, primarily it's streets, and I would say that the street network also includes transportation movements by peds, by pedestrians in particular. So ADA compliance is very important to us, and meeting those requirements by federal law. Those are federal requirements in use of transportation funds. When we're fixing or rehabbing a street, we must also fix sidewalks and curb ramps to make those areas accessible and ADA compliant. So I think as a policy, from a transportation policy standpoint, that's nationwide. That's a movement that we've seen in the last 20 years. Does that help?
Include sidewalks?
So we have a transportation standalone budget for sidewalks, so priority repairs that we've made as the cost of compliance for when I talk about ADA compliance. And then as we build new roads, as we rehab roads, there's also sidewalk funding, sidewalks that are completed with that funding. So it has been both.
And then would it
Streets
include
and
bikes,
sidewalks.
trails?
Sometimes it depends. We talked a lot in the coalition about complete streets and accommodating system optimization. So if you can accommodate multimodal purpose uses, then you can actually save in congestion and lane width expansion. You can take pressure off of the network. So sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I would say that standalone trails, that's paid for by general revenue by the Parks Department, so off-street trails. And I will share a document that we've created. The 5 reasons we do adjacent sidewalk fixes at the same time that we fix streets. That's a very important document, and I'll get it to the council so you can understand why we do that.
Are there other questions?
I was just gonna make one other compliment too on the, I'm glad to see the sealing the cracks in there, and
Good.
I'd probably give it an even bigger emphasis, just talking about preventative and so forth. Ohio, was that, what's the acronym for?
Only handle it once.
Okay, couldn't figure out the I, okay. And then, I
It's
guess,
better than Odeo. Only do it once.
for Mr. Berkman, on the, you've talked about the 4 pieces of equipment we have to do the lot fill or the quick filling. What if they encounter something bigger? Do you have within the system of street repair, potholes and so forth, that if it's really beyond that it needs a little bit more of a major patch, do you have then another level that's called in?
Absolutely. Between our asphalt crews and the dedicated concrete crews, if there's a major patch or panel replacement or something, we'll get folks out to do that. Really the patchers are meant for a majority of that kind of early season, those calls that we get to see with those smaller blow-ups and quick hit things. And there's probably been from time to time a location where we've been able to address something in an emergency fashion and then come back with a more robust patch, a week or 2 later as need be, and as we can get folks staffed. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Guess I also want to compliment you on proceeding on some of these other items now. I think kind of the low-hanging fruit, and then also some of these that really have no financial consequences. You're just doing it. And I know Mr. Hoskins has been pointing a lot of those out to me in a recent meeting, so appreciate that.
Good. Thank you. Might as well hit the ground running.
Carl?
Okay, thank you. A couple of things. You talked about economies of scale, and that's a good thing. It's frustrating when you see a road project done and then LES comes through, 6 months
Yeah.
later and messes up
Yeah.
the new pavement. So that's really important. Also, we've had some issues in the past. I don't know how to title this, maybe planning for convenience or something, because we've had some road projects. I'm thinking of some, not in my district, but in South Lincoln, where there were Pioneer and some other east-west roads done at the same time, and just kind of nightmares of people
Okay.
getting through those areas. So
Yes.
staggering those out, maybe if you can do
Absolutely.
one year and another the next year, so it's not all gummed up the same season.
Absolutely.
The impact fee districts, what, I think I know the answer to this question, but what will that do for us by reducing the number of districts?
Yeah, I'll start, Lonnie, and if I miss anything. So again, it comes back to cost efficiency. And at this point, collectively, in each of those 7 districts, we get enough money to pay for things like consulting or design for a particular project rather than a robust project. So what we want those impact fee dollars to be accumulated and then spent on is the concrete and the labor that it takes to deliver an actual project. You absolutely need design, but it seems because it's so, it's broken up so much that you can't really grasp a big dollar amount to really put it into the street itself. And so you can get some efficiency out of those dollars if you put them together.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the current setup, it's, with that kind of revenue, I think we're getting closer to somewhere around just under about 3 million now, I mean, from our kind of last projections, so total for the impact fees. And I think if, you break that up 7 ways, right, you're a couple $100,000. So if you think about projects within a district.
Like 3.
And if you divide that now by 3, it's instead of a couple $100,000 and you're, kind of trying to do design, then maybe a turn lane the next year, whatever, now you're talking it's about $1 million in that district for, again, maybe a priority project that, this advisory committee can help decide, A, then B, then C, and what makes more sense. So it's really just a way to consolidate that funding and do something more impactful within those districts.
You can see the level of collection in District 3, for example, at the $1.2 million level. And if there were a real need in that area, we couldn't really have enough funds to put it there. So it lends itself to better spending. And what might even happen is that 1.2 million that could go toward a really good project sits there and is banked until you can spend it in some way. So,
Thank you.
yes, of course.
Cindy?
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the work you've put into this. And I just wanted to clarify, the coalition, we talked about impact fees, but we didn't talk about how to maybe consolidate. And so I know I visited with Thomas Schaefer and a number of folks, and I appreciate that Mr. Schaefer has been tracking this for the entire time the impact fees have been on, and was able to identify pretty easily that the 3 areas that are designated here have equal distribution. And so my understanding is by going from 7 to 3, we'll be able to do larger projects in one of these particular areas. We talked about, do we split it north-south? No. Do we split it east-west? I don't know. And then, but this, when he was able to come up with these figures, I'm just very appreciative of that. And I am a huge advocate of looking further into this particular division of the impact and consolidation.
Great clarification to make, yes.
Thank you. I did want to ask a question if I could. So on the implementation plan, which I'm very pleased to have each of those broken down and see that we're in progress, there are a number of things that have cost savings that are listed or anticipated, but there's no dollar figure. And so I'm wondering, how long will it take until we can actually assign some type of a dollar figure to some of these cost savings in the implementation plan?
Yeah, that's challenging.
Yeah,
You
I think,
talk a little bit
some
about
of them, it's probably a little more qualitative versus even quantitative, but I think what we'd like to do is, now that you've got this draft, as we continue to parse some of that out, we'll probably be sending you updates to this and say, hey, this next month, we're tackling item number 5 and 6, and by the way, this is what we're thinking for, the potential cost savings, and just, there's some of them that, I'm trying to think of a good example here.
Well, I know you were able to do the one on the lane width. That seemed to be a fairly easy computation.
That was good. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
easy to analyze.
I mean, if you look at like number 11, required geotechnical investigations for those street constructions, so as developments are coming in and really analyzing the soil types and makeups and what we ought to be doing for pavement thickness and things, we know that will result in less failing streets, less
Right.
repairs.
More enduring infrastructure for the
Depending
long
on how
term.
many subdivisions that's impacting in years to come, and that's kind of we know there's a long-term cost savings. It's a little bit tough to put your brain around a number, but we're gonna try to take some stabs at that to see what we can get impacted in there, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, we need to continue to list some of those things and see if we can figure those out.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's sort of,
Well, I know a lot of it says
care.
long-term savings, and I
Yeah.
get that, but
Yeah.
are there,
It's deferred
are we gonna be able to
maintenance.
quantify anything on a short-term basis, say within a year of the time that the coalition met? And is that the kind of thing you're talking about getting to us? Figures on, Monty?
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking through some of those other green ones too, and looking at, warranty bond inspection program. So again, those are probably longer term things. Those enhanced backfill is really kind of related to geotech, but, yeah, we'll try to continue to pull some of that information together and get you updates to this
Yeah.
as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Warren, you have a question?
So, well, a couple of things. It was about over 3 years ago now, we finished the Engineering Services Task Force
yes,
audit.
yes.
And I was happy to see the item 13, the enhanced backfill requirements.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
item 22, increased private development of testing and inspection.
Yes, good.
Where do we stand, I mean, when it says in progress, are we close? Is it far away? Is it, I mean,
Yeah,
I know
really-
we're doing a pilot project on the testing and inspection.
That's right.
Where are we on that?
Yeah, and so I think a lot of those that you'll see, even though we say in progress, a lot of those updates that we formally do to Lincoln Standard Plans, LSPs, sign off with a new EO at the end of the year, and some of our spec book, even though as a practice, we're already pushing and operating in that mode now, they'll really become more official at the end of the year as we update those documents and have them approved. But, so really, what I would tell you is some of those that say in progress are probably completed, but because it's not in an official policy or our documentation flow yet, I didn't want to technically say it's completed, but you bet.
Yeah, it needs to be codified, so that'll come forward in
Every
October.
fiscal year or calendar
October
year?
code cleanup, we'll use that October code cleanup that we do to bring a lot of these forward to council to institutionalize.
So the last one I had was, I'm very encouraged to see number 14, warranty bond inspection program.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that one of the complaints I frequently receive from developers is their bond has not been released, but it's 2 years past the expiration. And they're quite frustrated because what this does to them is it ties up their money.
Yeah,
And they cannot then turn that money around and use it for new projects.
Right.
Because the city has not released the bond.
bond for it.
Even though it's past the warranty date. So I'm very encouraged to see this. I'd
Good.
really like to see that in progress be completed shortly.
Okay, we'll work on that. Getting that completed.
I'd like to address for a moment the concrete underbase with an asphalt overlay. And also, Mickey, you've shared with us in different charts how the deterioration or erosion of streets, once it gets down to, you get that something in the early time versus how much it starts doing the substructure. And of course, the joint sealing, crack sealing will help on that.
Right.
But I've seen, and I think even out in NEPCO, as this developed, Fallbrook has gone to concrete with a couple inches of asphalt, and the idea is they go back and re-mill that every 5 years or whatever. Can you discuss a little bit about your current thoughts on that process versus total concrete and so forth?
Yeah, I think
We have
we,
about 5 minutes. I think Carl
Okay.
has a question. again.
I would just say,
fine.
yes,
No, you're
we
fine.
welcome that, and Lonnie is taking a long, hard look. I don't know if you have quick comments on,
Yeah, just real quick, and I know Jeff can probably provide you with some data too, but we have been looking probably more than we ever have at makeup of the street. I've been pushing staff a little bit even on some of our new CIP projects to look at full depth asphalt on a larger rock base. Just thinking 15, 20 years down the line when we've had some of these street repairs, we've had to go out, do individual pockets of concrete repair. It's very disruptive on an arterial. Traffic control for a whole season, we end up with more joints to seal. We're really thinking about more asphalt streets, assuming we can get the pavement design good and accurate for the type of vehicle load that's on it. So whether that be a composite street with a base or simply full depth asphalt, yeah, we're looking at those, and then you'll see some of that moving forward.
Yeah, Mr. Richardson, I thought you had.
I do have a question, but, so in the committee, I think there's pretty much unanimous agreement about the need.
yes.
What fun happens is with the funds, okay? And how do we pay for it? And the recommendation of the coalition was that there be a 50-cent sales tax. What other ways can we do that? What other options are there for funding? What needs to be done?
Well, if we look at a wheel tax increase, we would literally have to double the amount of wheel tax we'd have to collect. 76, we'd have to go to about 190, so, to raise the identical revenue. If we do a property tax increase, which nobody likes and is equally unpopular, if not more, and the coalition really stayed away from it, we would have to, I think an average household would be impacted by an additional $235 a year. So when you think about a half cent, we're already at a quarter cent. We'd have to raise about $31 more a year for an average household. It's 62 total. Plus, you have the benefit of that 30+% that is paid for with sales tax from visitors to Lincoln. The impact as a pragmatic matter is just the lowest. And I know taxes are unpopular, but streets are fundamental to what city government does. And outside of, I don't even know how we would be able to pay off the debt of taking on a bond to pay for these needs. Bonding is something that, we could explore some more. But again, you have to pay off the debt over that amount of time, and you have to be able to afford those debt payments. So this is really the best of all options in our estimation. It is, in your arena. At this point, we just want to parlay to you that we're ready. We're ready for a program and delivering a program like this. And it is serious. We don't want to kick the can down the road to our kids and our grandkids. This is not going to go away. This is something we need to tackle now. It's only going to get worse. You saw the funding projections that I provided. We have to stay ahead of construction inflation, and it's increasing beyond our control. So this is what we think is the best option for Lincoln, and we want to invest in Lincoln's future. We'd love to deliver a program like this to the community, and we think it's a good time to do it.
We have a couple minutes left. Are there any other questions from the council? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you guys for coming and presenting for us.
All right, thank you
Gave us a
so
lot to
much.
think about, and we look forward to hearing from you again.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Please let us know if you have any additional questions we can answer.
Consider the pre-council adjourned.
Ta-da.